screen, so you'll have this from here on, and you'll also have the slides for later on. So today we're going to be looking at point, line, and plane. So we're starting with like the basic building blocks of drawing. And it's also something that we've been investigating through our work with Adobe Illustrator. I'm going to present this. And also let me just make sure that when I'm sharing, I also can share my audio, because there's some videos and I want to make sure that sorry, one second. There we go, share computer sound. And we're back. Plane, I'm sure we've gone over this in other classes before. Okay. All right, so I wanted to start off by talking about point, line, and plane by introducing you to this artist, or maybe you're familiar with him. His name is Sol LeWitt. Sol LeWitt was a minimalist, and he came about in the 1960s. He's considered as one of the first artists to tackle the idea of conceptual art. And so in 1968, he kind of came onto the scene with this series of works called wall drawings. So these, as you can tell by the room, these are pretty large. These are about like 8 foot high and another like 24 to 32 feet wide. And there's part of a series, so this is just one, and then here's another example of some of these wall drawings that he creates. And to correct myself, when I say he creates them, he's actually not the one drawing these lines onto these walls. What he's doing is he is providing schematics for assistants and people to take his instructions, where he gives you points and he tells you how far apart they should be and how to connect these different points. And no matter where it's being exhibited, he sends you the instructions, has people install it for him, and then once the exhibit is over, they erase it. And so it is no longer part of their collection unless it's something permanent that the museum wants to have. Here's an example of what these instructions look like. As I mentioned, he's giving them dimensions. He's telling them what the distance between these different points need to be, talking about the lines that they should follow. And so I wanted to start off this idea of point as giving people directives, telling people to start from somewhere, go somewhere else. And one thing that he's not necessarily concerned about is how people draw these lines. He kind of embraces the idea that everyone has a different line quality, a different width, a different strength of these lines. And that's something that he wants to be embraced by his work, and that by giving such detailed instructions for it, no matter who is installing it from place to place, the effect is still the same. And this is another one. This is like, a more professionalized version of some of these instructions. And they're all numbered. It's funny, I was watching a YouTube video with him yesterday. He passed in 2007, but there was someone that, is like working, has his collection, and they always talk. It seems like they're a little like sensitive to the fact that people think that he didn't do any work, that he just kind of told people what to do. And the woman talking about his work was just like, he was in the studio 5 days a week, 6 days a week. He was one of the most hardworking artists, which I believe, but it's also just funny that he had to kind of backpedal and say things like that. Okay. So speaking more about point, I wanted to bring up this artist named Jim Campbell. He's definitely an artist that I crush on. I think his work is really amazing and beautiful. He's a video artist, and the medium that he works with is video are LED lights. In some places he moves away from the LEDs, but this is generally how he's working. What he does is he takes footage, oftentimes it's home footage or low quality footage that he takes from a camcorder that he goes around recording. And then he's trying to distill and simplify these videos into points. So if you can imagine that this was a video that he took, these are two swimmers that you see. Each of these LED points on this video are pixels or pixel groups from the video. So if you imagine like this is a group of 8 pixels from this original home video, he's taking it and then he's condensing it into just this one point. And he goes along, and here you see some of these, they vary in transparency. And so this point was a group of, say, 8 pixels that were maybe a little bit darker than the ones around it. And here is also a point, but rather than showing you the point, he's removing it, and you can't see it. His works looked like this don't really do it justice, so I'm going to play a little video. First, before I do that, I want to make sure that y'all can like kind of hear it. I'm going to play it. Let me know if you can hear the audio through your computers. Oops. Can you all hear this? Okay. I can't, and that's okay, because I've watched it. Can you also hear me? Okay, cool. All right. So that's a little look into Jim Campbell and his process. As you can see, he's interested in the idea of mosaics and being able to get a fuller picture of something by looking away or even by blurring it. And he's also interested in motion and how these points, when viewed back to back to back, you get these like beautiful shimmering motion coming out of them. And I mentioned that he mostly works with LEDs, but some of his videos he does some really cool things with. This is a piece that I got to see, I think, last spring. It's called Tilted Plane. And again, he's taking home footage. In this case, it was like a flock of birds flying um, across the horizon. But rather than these videos being like on a frame, each pixel is on a light bulb, and then the light bulb's at this 30-degree angle from one corner of the room to the other. Um, Really, words can't describe it. It's like one of the pieces that, like, I don't know, it just like has a really huge impact on me. And one note on him about like artist paths, as I mentioned, like most artists don't have a very linear path. He actually worked in Silicon Valley doing this kind of work where he was like taking low resolution videos and blowing it up so it could be visible at a nice crisp resolution. And then he kind of gave that all up and became an artist and took his tech with him. Okay, so now I kind of want to go way back in time to talk about lines. This is a series of lines. They are World UNESCO sites. It's called the Nazca Lines, and they are located in the deserts of Peru. And so these Nazca lines are huge. Some of them span like an acre or two. And we're in the desert, so all of these lines you see are actually grooves that the people of Peru uh, dug into this dirt. And it's amazing the amount of symmetry that they can get on such a large scale. Part of the beauty of this is that like no one really knows how they made it. If some of you have taken foundations classes here, I'm teaching one right now, and we do a unit on blind contour. I like to call these the world's largest blind contour drawings. Just imagine being these people trying to follow these curves and trying to mimic them on one side to the other, and not really knowing what that angle is supposed to be. It wasn't until recently, until the invention of planes, that people actually got to see them from far away. So these original people that were working on them definitely had no idea if their work was correct, but they did it. There's a lot of myths as to why people created these Nazca lines. This is a collection of them. The prevailing myth is that these were glyphs that were used to communicate with the gods. And there was like a Nat Geo video that I saw recently, and they actually found ground up seashells, oyster shells, clams in all these ditches, all these grooves that they created, which is nuts because the ocean and the sea is like so far away from these mountains. So people brought them, they ground them up, and they were kind of used as offerings, wishing for rain in this part of Peru. I also wanted to connect this with some of the petroglyphs, which I actually saw a couple weeks ago here in Albuquerque on the west side. We'll see like from those first drawings that we saw from Solowit and how like they're all like right angles, line connecting to line. Something that I think is interesting is the way people from different cultures like are naturally drawing lines. And in a lot of non-Western cultures, spirals and radial symmetry are a much bigger part of their design language. Thinking about Buddhism and Hinduism with this idea of reincarnation, time in other parts of the world doesn't look like a line like we normally think about it. And I like to think that these spirals are kind of an indication of how time is just always going in circles. Connecting that to these works that we've already seen by Guadalupe Maravilla. Here, he's taking these ideas of lines that do not cross, that swirl, that are always bumping up against each other, with this idea of migration and people heading towards a place, all with the same path, but each time that path gets harder and harder to make. And so here he's like starting to map these lines onto actual pieces of land and geography. And then another artist who I actually got to work with at the Queens Museum is this artist named Rani Quevedo. So from the same geographic region, working with this idea of line and migration. And here he's transforming this floor of the Queens Museum, which actually used to be an ice skating rink. Then later it was turned into a recreational court, and now it's part of the museum. He's taking some of the design language that we get from different games we play, soccer fields, basketball courts, badminton, and volleyball, and he's having fun with them. He's talking about how all these lines convey different rules on this playing field, and he's connecting that to this idea of borders between countries, and how the borders that we think about between our states and the different countries are not always the same. And in our world today, we have such strict borders that are happening, most typically, like, from the US and south to Mexico. And now you've got all these, funny uh, headlines of other countries kind of banning the US from entering their borders due to our lack of handling the pandemic well. Um, and above this court with all these different lines are these four flags. They appear to be the same, but these are actually four flags from different civilizations in the Andes Mountains. So the Incas, the people from this region of South America. Today, when we think of our flags are very, very different from each other, from the US to Brazil to China. We all use different color schemes. We have different icons kind of showing how unique and different we are. That's not how people always made flags. And these were four different civilizations. And rather than showing their differences by making them drastically different, these were their four flags. The only difference is this middle line. Some are white, some are red, some are green, some are yellow. And then the pattern that emerges. So this idea of like unity is something that kind of existed before, and we're slowly moving away from that with the lines we draw. This is some other work. These are just some early sketches and prints that Ronnie would create. And here you can see some other language from other sports and tracks. Okay, I want to show you another video by this artist named Maya Lin, thinking about lines, borders, and now her focus is usually on water. And here she's talking about the Hudson River in New York and rivers in general. I'm going to play this for you all. I can't hear it, but again, that's fine. All right. So Maya Lin was primarily is an artist and an architect, and so a lot of her work exists at this intersection between these two fields. She's also focused on geography and place. And in design and math terms, a line is really just a connection of points. It's a point next to another point next to another point, and they're all headed towards a certain direction. And here in her River is a Drawing series, she's really building on that. And when you see these lines comprised of millions and millions of circles, they start to take on a life of their own. Much like the rivers that we see today, we kind of think of them as static. Again, going back to the idea of a map, we see them as a line, and it's always been that way. But these are life forms, that can shrink and they can also grow and flood. And I think that this is a piece that kind of captures some of that idea. We're going to start moving into plane now, and this is still Maya Lin. These are a series of land art pieces that she created called wave fields. There's several, I think there's like 5 in the world. This was taken also in New York in the Hudson Valley at an outdoor sculpture park called Storm King. And so here, these waves are landscaped into the earth, and in some cases on top of them. And I don't really know what I have to say beyond they're really beautiful. They're really calming. If you see one, it's like just a really comfy place to sit and I don't know, just reflect. It's cool seeing these waves and these lines of the ocean totally still as they are here on the land. Unfortunately, when I went to see this was like in 2013. It had rained the whole week, and it's very what's it called, sensitive terrain because it gets all muddy. But this is some of her other work that she creates. Okay, so talking about plane and the fact that we're online all of our lives now, and how everything in our life is essentially like put on this like rectangle, and then within that we have other rectangles. Here's this artist named Raphael Rosendahl. He's a Dutch artist, and in 2014, he created this plugin for Google Chrome. It's called Abstract Browsing, where it takes whatever web page you're on. And if you know anything about web design, all our web pages are basically building blocks. These building blocks are called divs, and there's divs that go below, divs that go on top, divs that are next to each other. And so with this plugin, it's removing all the information from your screen, and it's just showing you these divs and these colors that he set in a color scheme. And so if you look at this and you think closely about these shapes and this search bar and these 2 buttons, this is actually the Google homepage that you would normally see, but it's been removed of all information. Some of us might be able to see it just because these are places that we come across on the daily, and even when they're abstracted, we can kind of see these planes, and they are in reference to these things that we already know. Here's another plane. I'm going to put this to the group. Anyone recognize what website we're looking at here? Oh, I actually forgot. I don't even know if I can hear you right now. So if anyone said anything, I couldn't hear you. Um, but it's Gmail. So we're looking at Gmail and all these different lines in our subject headers. And when we think about like seeing it like this, it starts to like overwhelm me. Like, and knowing that these are all different lines that my eye is being called to, it's no wonder that like online schooling is just like so much more taxing and exhausting, because we're seeing so much information on our screens that we wouldn't normally, and it wouldn't normally be arranged in such a precise way. And then this last one, we're looking at our good old friend Twitter here in this piece of abstract browsing. One fun fact I like to think about is that all of these pieces are not paintings, they're actually tapestries. So they're all woven, and they're done by a computer. And the computer, or sorry, what's it called? When people first got into computers and trying to like get computers to tell other machines what to do. The first machine that the coders were able to get computers to talk to was actually a loom. And so they were able to make these punch cards for computers that told looms how much of a string that they're supposed to weave, what color they're supposed to use, and where these lines end. And I think this work is a cool way to tie this idea together. So yeah, we've got these planes that are very, very rational. They're on these websites and they're meant to convey information as rationally and as well designed as possible. I want to now show this work by the artist Hanae Utamura. So Hana Utamura, she creates these performances and she's going to places that have had some impact from nuclear activity or radiation. In this case, she's in this island between South Korea and North Korea. And you can kind of fill in the gaps as to why she's here. But some of this work stems with her personal life. I'm going to go to this video just so you can kind of see what these performances look like. Let's go a little further. So here she is. This is the location that she's working from. And then here she is drawing her works. So Hana is from the city of Fukushima, and Fukushima had a large nuclear power plant that had a explosion, and it kind of affected the people of the city, more than kind of, to be honest. I don't know why I'm saying that. And her father worked in the government in Fukushima, and his department was tasked with trying to figure out how to distribute aid to people in the city. Specifically people that were affected by this explosion, by this radiation. And so what the government ended up doing in Fukushima is they ended up drawing lines. So they set this point here. This is like where that reactor was set off. And then they just drew concentric circles around it. And then depending on where you lived in distance to this middle point, was how much money you got. So if you lived really close in this first circle, you would receive, let's say, $1,000. And then the further and further out from that point, you would receive less and less money until the impact zone stopped. But what Hana is interested in is that we've got this like very, very well-designed map of concentric circles, and that's supposed to distribute aid evenly. And then we have nature that's kind of running its course. We have these lines that are running through it and going across it. And these lines are lines of wind. And these wind patterns are traveling some of these harmful particles like across the city to places that are no longer within this radius zone, or in some cases are going across some of these lines that this government is very rationally thinking through. And I think her work talks a lot about this idea of like rationality and trying to make these like perfectly geometric lines, and our obsession with that and trying to think that they are like scientifically correct, that they're all like perfect. But in reality, like that's kind of hard to do. There's so many other factors that are going into these systems that we think are supposed to work. So that's some of her performances. She's got a series of them that you can look at online. And I think we're taking us into the last artist I wanted to share. Oops, that's not where I wanted to go. So here we are. This is another still from her work. And I want to introduce this artist, Julie Mehretu, who I actually shared with Zoe CW yesterday. I'm just going to take a sip of water. So Julie Mehretu is from Ethiopia, was born in Ethiopia, and has been living in New York City as a working artist. She's really interested in this idea of architecture and rationality, and then nature, and also, in some cases, disaster. All of her paintings, one, they're huge. They're on a really, really enormous scale. And they exist in two planes. We have this plane beneath it, and you can kind of see some of these lines, again, with these very like rational grid-like lines Here, they're actually architectural renderings of cityscapes. And so she draws these lines accordance to like architectural blueprints, and then she's gessoing it. She's like kind of covering up these lines, and then on top of that is this other plane where she has these abstract shapes that reference flags, that reference different corporations, that also reference periods of bad history, of disaster in some of these cities. And she's like mapping them on top of that. And even though these lines aren't necessarily following the original grid that this blueprint is drawn beneath it, there is like some sort of unity with all of this chaos that kind of goes above the order of our cities. Here's another one. I forget the name of that first one, but I know this one is Istanbul that she's looking at. In addition, she's also thinking about calligraphy, and here she's like referencing the form of Arabic with some of these other textures and lines that she's creating and layering on top of them. And here, this is a close up of what the paintings look like before she adds this layer of gesso and then adds the planes on top of it. Another piece here where she's playing with colors and these different planes. And then here she's actually even reintroducing some of these very precise lines through these stairs and architectural lines. And then the last thing I wanted to share with us today is a piece. This is a longer video. This is a great resource called Art21. It's put together by PBS where they kind of do these long form interviews with artists. I want to go to the end of it where she's in conversation with this jazz artist named Jason Moran, who is playing the keys while she's painting some of these non grid like planes and lines. I'm going to go to about here, and we're going to just take this to the end. Okay, I'm gonna just stop sharing. Can someone try speaking just so I can see if I hear you all?
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, I can hear you now. Okay, great. Okay, so that's this first seminar on point, line, and plane. Um, Again, I'm not trying to tell you all like how to use these concepts. I'm showing you a bunch of different artists and the way that they think about these concepts in their work. Um, Anything that resonated with people? Was there like a particular piece or artist I shared that struck a nerve with you all?
I loved the light. The first artist you showed with using like the people swimming.
Jim
Uh,
Campbell? Yeah,
yeah, I really loved that. That was a really great idea.
he's awesome. Yeah. Anyone else?
I really liked the river, how she like intentionally used the river as positive space. Because like I always think of it as negative space, like it's something deeper
Hmm.
and like carving out. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, that's like the gem of a line in that video. Thank you, Kimball. Um, Anyone else? Last one? All right. Well, from this and from these seminars, I'm going to give you all a prompt, and I'm going to share screen again. Hopefully, okay, I'm not going to share computer sound, so now I can hear you if you, in case you have questions. So one of my troubles or things that I'm trying to work out is coming up with prompts that are open-ended that all of you, regardless of your medium, can respond to. Let's try this one. So this prompt, imagine 2 points. One is you today, the other is you during one of your warmest moments of 2019. Connect these 2 points, show your work. These are intentionally abstract. These are intentionally hard because I know you all can handle it because you all are very, very accomplished and technically sound. The way you approach this is up to you. Okay, if I can just call on like a couple people as like examples. For example, if like Trinity, if you wanted to think about your work and environmentalism and specifically think about like impacts on the environment from last year to today, focus on that and like maybe have that as like a starting point. For Kirby, for example, think about anthropomorphizing this last year for you. Like, what animal might that be? What would they have gone through from that point to now? For someone like Kai, revisit a piece that you took maybe in 2019 and looking at the light there and then trying to recreate it using that original point from something in 2019 as a starting. Um, I know it's a little vague, and if some of you are confused and stuck with how to go with this, please ask. Please speak up with that. But my goal is to not give you like a technical thing, like use line to do this, or like make a 3x3 grid and do this. I would rather you approach it from what you know best, which is your work. Any general questions on this prompt before I let you all out of here?
So like this isn't supposed to connect with our like main project.
It is. So yeah, that's also the goal is like for these pieces to somehow connect to what you're doing. Um, so with Emma, if you're thinking about like if you're continuing to work with like the concept of cowboys, instead of thinking like one of you today, like think about like what life of cowboys has like how that has changed from last year to now. Okay, so you can be a little more flexible. It doesn't have to be you, but like think of something today and something at like that same subject like a year ago, and like what has changed. Does that make a little more sense? Is that helpful at all, Emma?
Yeah, does it have to like be a year ago or like could it be like farther back?
That's
Or
fine too. Yeah, yeah. Anyone else have like a question on this one?
So is it like one piece like conjoining these two moments, or like
It's up to you. Like for you, for you, Krista, like if you're working with like photos and paintings, like maybe your 2 points, like 1 point is a photo of your subject, and then this new point is your painting of that subject because you are no longer near them or with them.
Okay.
Yeah, and like that is how you connect it. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So Thursdays I usually have office hours from 3 to 5. I might be like at the grocery store. So if you can just send me an email if you know you want to talk sometime today, and then I'll make sure that I'm home before that time. And we'll probably do that from here on out. So yeah, any last words? It's 10:50.
I had a question about the project proposals.
Yes.
Can you like share the link to that page? I couldn't find it.
Oh, okay. It should be on Canvas, but if not, I'll relink it on
Okay.
Canvas, okay?
Thank you.
Did you try it from there or did it not work out?
I looked on Canvas, but I couldn't find any like assignments or links or anything.
Okay, I'll update that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. And yeah, project proposal is Monday. It's no longer tomorrow. That was not realistic. Okay. And yeah, I'll put more info on that later, and I'll see you all tomorrow.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, later.